the first records rarely begin with battle. They begin with scale, residue, and the difficulty of describing what remains after contact. Survey teams moving through shattered plains have noted footprints too long for conventional walkers and too narrow for the mass they implied. Pit captures taken from extreme distance show a tall bipedal form crossing ruined ground with a motion more similar to a living runner than to a reactor-driven siege engine. Fragments recovered from these sites do not resemble forged plate or cast adamantium. They show psycho-reactive material growth, smooth internal channels, and stress patterns closer to bone than steel. In several investigations, Imperial observers misclassified these remains as ceremonial Xenos architecture until the spacing of joints, the height of the stride, and the arrangement of embedded spirit matrices indicated a war machine of exceptional size. Later comparative studies placed these findings within the Titan traditions of the craft world Aeldari. The engine described across these reports, archive sketches, and xenological assessments is the Phantom Titan. Within Aeldari military tradition, the Phantom stands as the larger of the principal craft world Titan classes, commonly identified in surviving Imperial and xenological records, distinct from the smaller Revenant and associated with battles of greater consequence rather than routine raiding or fast interdiction. Sources consistently describe it as a construct of grace, speed, and unusually high responsiveness for a war engine of its scale. This distinction matters because the Phantom was not conceived according to the same logic as human Titan development. Imperial engines are often understood through mass, layered redundancy, cathedral-like superstructure, and the deliberate overbuilding required by machine cult orthodoxy. The Phantom emerges from another technological philosophy entirely, one that values psycho-reactive construction, integrated control, and the reduction of mechanical delay between intention and motion. It is not simply an Aeldari answer to the Titan concept. It is the result of an older civilization applying its own values of speed, balance, psychic cohesion, and living material design to the problem of building a colossal war construct. To understand the Phantom's origins, it is necessary to begin not with a single inventor or forge complex, but with the wider Aeldari relationship to wraithbone and soul technology. Aeldari Titans are not assembled in the same industrial sense used by the Imperium. Their structural bodies are grown from wraithbone by bonesingers, artisans whose psychoactive craft shapes matter through disciplined psychic practice. This already sets the Phantom apart from most other super-heavy engines in the setting. Its frame is not the outcome of riveted macrofabrication alone, but of cultivated growth directed toward martial form. Lexicanum sources describing Elder Titans note that wraithbone gives them a finely tuned musculature, akin to that of a living creature. That comparison is not poetic decoration. It explains why so many witnesses describe Aeldari Titans as moving with a biological quality that human crews find disorienting. In developmental terms, the Phantom represents the mature battlefield expression of this craft world method. A giant body built less like a fortress on legs and more like a living skeleton wrapped around a psychic nervous system. At the center of that development is the wraithbone core. Accounts of the Phantom consistently emphasize that the core allows the souls contained within spirit stones to move throughout the machine. In practical terms, this means the Phantom is not only piloted, it is inhabited. The dead are not decorative relics fixed into a casing. They participate in the machine's consciousness through the internal spirit network, and that network merges with the minds of the living crew. The result is a composite sentience with a degree of unity rare among large war engines. This is one of the core reasons the Phantom appears in lore as something more than a platform for weapons. Its construction principle joins material frame, soul architecture, and living operators into one responsive intelligence. The phrase often repeated in secondary descriptions, that the Titan has a consciousness of its own, is not a metaphor for sophisticated targeting. It describes a real condition within Aeldari techno-mysticism. In origin and design, the Phantom was made to think as well as move. That consciousness does not arise accidentally. broader Eldar Titan material on Lexicanum describes the presence of an infinity circuit within the Titan, linked to a ritual process known as soul grafting. A still-living Eldari known as a Lord Phoenix imprints character and memory into the circuit, creating a spiritual foundation for later control integration. Fragments of the stone used in that process are then implanted into the headbands of the steersman, allowing them to psychically meld with the spirit within the Titan and function as one composite mind. Even allowing for the fragmentary nature of xenological reporting, this suggests that phantom development includes not just structural fabrication, but also the deliberate creation of a permanent psychic identity for the machine. The phantom is therefore not developed in the same sequence as a human war engine, where chassis, motive systems, reactor, crew systems, and doctrinal consecration follow a recognizable mechanical order. In the Aeldari model, identity is part of architecture from an early stage. The Titan is developed as a vessel of continuity between living operators and ancestral dead. That is an extraordinary divergence in design culture, and it shapes every later feature of the class. The living component of the Phantom's development is equally distinctive. Sources differ on whether a Phantom may be guided by a single steersman or by 3 living pilots, but both Lexicanum and the fandom source agree that familial bonds are central to effective control, and that twins or triplets are especially valued. This is not incidental cultural flavour. The craftworlds are a species in demographic decline, and births are rare. The occurrence of siblings, particularly twins or triplets, is therefore treated as both precious and fateful. In Titan service, those natural bonds help solve a technical problem: how to synchronize multiple minds with a giant psychic construct quickly enough to achieve fluid movement. Many crews are raised from birth for the role, and some of the most skilled are those whose dead siblings have already been interred within the Titan's spirit network. In developmental terms, the Phantom is not complete when its body is grown. Its true completion requires a human equivalent of generational calibration, except the Aeldari version is familial, psychic, and ritualized. A clan does not merely inherit a machine, it matures with it across time. This is where the concept of the Titan clan becomes crucial. Lexicanum describes whole families entrusted with the maintenance and operation of Aeldari Titans, forming respected collectives responsible for preserving the bonds required for control. That arrangement indicates a long developmental cycle. A Phantom is not mass-produced, and it is not casually reassigned. It belongs to an extended web of training, upkeep, memory, and inherited discipline. Some notable clans are associated with specific craftworlds, including Saimhan, Bieltan, Iandan, and Luganath. The existence of these clans implies that Phantom construction and continuation are tied to institutional memory within the craftworlds, even though those institutions do not resemble the centralized industrial cults of Mars. A Phantom's development is therefore not just technical growth, but cultural succession. This is probably why so many descriptions of the class stress reverence. The loss of one is not simply the loss of a battlefield asset. It is the destruction of a lineage, a spiritual archive, and a rare concentration of irreplaceable expertise. The thing is a Titan, yes, but also a family mausoleum with legs. Grim little efficiency trick, very Aeldari. The external design follows logically from these origins. Elder Titans in general are described as tall, slim, and shaped with more grace and beauty than the brutish functionality of their counterparts. The Phantom embodies that principle at full scale. Its height places the crew high above the battlefield in a head cockpit, while the rest of the structure remains relatively narrow and mobile compared with Imperial equivalents. Fin-like veins or wings associated with its silhouette are not aesthetic waste. They project hollow fields, image-distorting systems that confuse enemy sensors and targeters. Unlike void shields, these do not absorb punishment through brute resilience. They distort perception and targeting, buying survival through misdirection and movement. That defensive philosophy must be understood as part of the class's developmental identity. The Phantom was not built to win attritional exchanges by standing still under bombardment. It was developed to avoid the kind of contact in which thicker, slower Titan doctrines excel. Its shape, protection, and control architecture all point toward one outcome: a giant engine capable of moving with shocking precision while remaining difficult to pin down. Even the cockpit arrangement tells the same story. The head-mounted crew position offers strong visual command over terrain, but more importantly it fits the Aeldari preference for concentrated psychic oversight rather than dispersed compartmentalized labor. Imperial Titans often evoke the management of a walking fortress. The Phantom instead behaves like a singular body directed by an intensely unified consciousness. When sources say it can think, react, and move with the speed of an aspect warrior once crew and Titan consciousness merge, that should be read as the endpoint of the class's development. Every element, from wraithbone growth to family crew structure to soul integration, exists to reduce friction between will and action. The Phantom is what happens when a civilization decides that a Titan should not merely obey its operators, but should become inseparable from them. Its battlefield rarity also belongs to its origin story. Lexicanum states that Phantom Titans do not take part in ordinary Aeldari raids and surgical strikes, but are reserved for pitched battles when a craft world commits to desperate open war and webway portals are widened to allow these engines to pass. This is a critical point for understanding why the Phantom appears in the lore as both renowned and uncommon. The craft worlds do not field them casually, because their strategic culture prefers precision, conservation of life, and carefully chosen engagements. To commit a Phantom is to acknowledge that a conflict has moved beyond the scale of ordinary intervention. Developmentally, this means the class was never intended as a standard line asset. It is a reserve embodiment of craftworld strength, called forth when the Aeldari judge that subtlety alone will not be enough. That role reinforces the reverent manner in which clans maintain them, and explains why the class is wrapped in such ritual and ancestral continuity. The historical development of the Phantom in published lore also shows an interesting pattern. Lexicanum's broader epic and Codex Titanicus references indicate that Titan-focused publications in the 1990s were central to formalizing much of the background around large engines, including the wider Titan ecosystem in Warhammer. While that publication history exists outside the in-universe timeline, it helps explain why Phantom lore often arrives through technical sidebars, clan references, and specialized Titan material rather than through the central narratives that dominate Space Marine and Imperial Guard storytelling. In other words, the Phantom's background developed as part of the setting's Titan subculture, as much as through mainstream faction narratives. That is why its lore can feel dense, precise, and oddly intimate at the same time. The class was built in the fiction as a sacred engine of the craft worlds, and it was built in publication history as one of the defining examples of how radically non-imperial Titan design could be. By the end of any serious examination of its origins, one conclusion becomes difficult to avoid. The Phantom Titan is not significant merely because it is large, armed, or feared. It matters because it condenses the major themes of Aeldari civilization into a single war construct. Its body is grown rather than manufactured. Its control system depends on psychic union rather than mechanical mediation. Its consciousness is shared by the living and the dead. Its crews are shaped by kinship, loss, and inherited duty. Its deployment reflects strategic restraint rather than industrial abundance. Even before discussing its weapons in detail, the class already communicates a complete worldview. It is the craft world answer to extinction pressure, ancestral obligation, and the need to project overwhelming force without abandoning cultural identity. The Phantom did not emerge from a forge line trying to outproduce the enemy. It emerged from a dying but highly advanced people refusing to separate war from memory or engineering from the soul. The Phantom Titan continues to distinguish itself not only through its origins, but through a set of physical and operational traits that place it outside the expectations formed by observing Imperial war engines. Where most super heavy walkers rely on bulk, layered armor, and redundant systems to endure sustained engagement, the Phantom reflects a design philosophy centered on efficiency of motion, precision of strike, and the minimization of exposure. Its silhouette is often described as tall and slender, with elongated limbs and a narrow torso, Yet this outward simplicity conceals a highly sophisticated internal structure. The wraithbone frame, grown rather than assembled, forms a continuous load-bearing lattice that distributes stress across the entire body rather than concentrating it in joints or plated segments. This allows the Phantom to maintain structural integrity while executing movements that would compromise more rigid mechanical designs. The height of the Phantom Titan varies across accounts, but it consistently exceeds that of the smaller Revenant class and approaches or rivals the scale of many Imperial engines. Despite this size, observers repeatedly note that it does not move like a machine burdened by mass. Its stride is described as fluid and balanced, with a centre of gravity that shifts dynamically in response to terrain. This is made possible by the integration of the psychic control system with the wraithbone musculature. Instead of issuing discrete mechanical commands that must be translated into actuator responses, the pilot or pilots direct the Titan through thought patterns that are interpreted almost instantaneously by the psycho-reactive structure. In effect, the Phantom does not simply walk across the battlefield. It flows through it, adjusting posture, stride length, and orientation with a level of responsiveness that challenges conventional targeting solutions. This responsiveness extends into its reaction time under combat conditions. Once the consciousness of the pilots merges with that of the Titan's spirit network, the delay between perception and action is reduced to a level comparable to that of an Aeldari infantry warrior. This characteristic is frequently cited as one of the Phantom's most dangerous attributes. At a scale where most engines must commit to movements seconds in advance, the Phantom can alter its course, adjust its aim, or reposition its entire frame in a fraction of that time. This creates a form of large-scale agility that is extremely difficult for slower targeting systems to predict. Imperial Auspex systems, calibrated to track the momentum profiles of heavier, less responsive walkers, often struggle to maintain accurate locks on a Phantom that is actively maneuvering. The external design incorporates several features that enhance this evasive capability. Among the most significant are the hollow field projectors integrated into the Titan's upper structure, often mounted on fin-like extensions that rise from the back or shoulders. These projectors generate a field of shifting light and distortion around the Titan, altering its apparent position and shape. To an observer relying on visual targeting, the Phantom may appear to flicker or blur, with edges that do not align consistently from one moment to the next. Sensor-based targeting is similarly affected as the hollow field interferes with range finding and tracking algorithms. Unlike void shields, which absorb incoming energy until they collapse, the hollow field is designed to prevent accurate targeting in the first place. Its effectiveness increases with the Titan's movement, creating a layered defense where speed and distortion reinforce each other. The armor of the Phantom Titan reflects the same philosophy. Wraithbone plating provides significant resilience, but it is not intended to function as a primary defense against sustained heavy bombardment. Instead, it serves as a final barrier in the event that incoming fire penetrates the Titan's evasive measures. The material itself exhibits properties that differ from conventional alloys. It is both strong and flexible, capable of absorbing and redistributing energy across its structure. This reduces the likelihood of catastrophic failure from localized impacts, but it does not render the Titan invulnerable. Concentrated fire from sufficiently powerful weapons can still inflict severe damage, particularly if the Phantom is forced into a position where it cannot effectively maneuver. Internally, the Titan's structure is organized around its wraithbone core and the network of spirit stones embedded throughout its frame. These stones house the souls of deceased Aeldari, which contribute to the Titan's composite consciousness. The internal layout prioritizes the uninterrupted flow of psychic energy and information between these elements. Channels within the wraithbone act as conduits, allowing the spirit network to extend into every part of the Titan's body. This creates a system where damage to one area can be compensated for by adjustments elsewhere, as the Titan's consciousness redistributes effort and control to maintain function. In practical terms, this means that the Phantom can continue operating effectively even after sustaining damage that would disable more compartmentalized machines. The offensive capabilities of the Phantom Titan are centered on a selection of heavy weapons designed to engage both armored targets and massed formations at long range. Among the most commonly associated armaments is the Pulsar, a weapon that delivers rapid sequences of high-energy blasts, capable of penetrating heavy armor. The Pulsar's rate of fire and destructive output make it effective against both large vehicles and other Titans, allowing the Phantom to engage high-value targets with sustained pressure. Complementing this is the Titan-class laser weaponry, often described as a bright lance or similar system, which focuses immense energy into a single, precise beam. This type of weapon is particularly suited for breaching fortified positions or delivering decisive strikes against critical components of enemy engines. In addition to these primary weapons, the Phantom may be equipped with secondary systems that enhance its versatility. Missile launchers integrated into the Titan structure provide the ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously or to saturate an area with explosive force. These systems allow the Phantom to adapt its engagement profile based on the tactical situation, shifting from precision strikes against individual targets to broader area denial when required. The combination of high-energy direct-fire weapons and flexible secondary systems ensures that the Phantom can operate effectively across a range of combat scenarios. What distinguishes the Phantom's offensive capability is not only the power of its weapons, but the manner in which they are employed. The Titan's advanced targeting systems, augmented by the psychic perception of its pilots and spirit network, allow for extremely accurate fire even while in motion. This enables the Phantom to maintain offensive pressure without sacrificing its defensive mobility. Where other Titans might need to stabilize or reduce movement to achieve accurate targeting, the Phantom can continue to maneuver, making it a far more elusive and dynamic threat on the battlefield. The integration of psychic awareness into its targeting process also provides advantages that are difficult to quantify in purely mechanical terms. The pilots, merged with the Titan's consciousness, can perceive the battlefield in a way that extends beyond standard sensor input. This may include anticipatory awareness of enemy movement, or the ability to prioritize targets based on subtle shifts in the combat environment. While such capabilities are not fully understood by Imperial observers, they contribute to the consistent reports of Phantom Titans engaging targets with a level of precision and timing that appears almost predictive. Defensively, the Phantom relies on a layered approach that combines evasion, distortion, and structural resilience. The holofield serves as the first line of defense, reducing the likelihood of incoming fire making effective contact. The Titan's speed and agility form the second layer, allowing it to avoid threats that bypass the holofield. Finally, the wraithbone structure provides a degree of durability against impacts that cannot be avoided. This combination creates a defensive profile that is fundamentally different from that of more heavily armored Titans. It is less about enduring damage and more about preventing damage from occurring in the first place. This approach, however, introduces certain limitations. The Phantom's reliance on mobility means that its effectiveness can be reduced in environments that restrict movement, such as dense urban terrain or confined spaces. In such conditions, the Titan may find it more difficult to exploit its speed and may be forced into engagements where its lighter armor becomes a liability. Additionally, the holofield, while highly effective, is not infallible. Advanced targeting systems or sheer volume of fire can degrade its effectiveness, increasing the risk of successful hits. Despite these limitations, the Phantom Titan remains one of the most formidable war engines within the Aeldari arsenal. Its combination of speed, precision, and integrated consciousness allows it to operate in a manner that few other machines can match. It does not rely on overwhelming mass or sheer durability to dominate the battlefield. Instead, it leverages a synthesis of advanced technology and psychic integration to outmaneuver, outthink, and outstrike its opponents. In doing so, it exemplifies the broader Aeldari approach to warfare, where efficiency, coordination, and precision are valued above brute force. As a result, the Phantom Titan occupies a unique position within the hierarchy of war machines. It is neither a simple escalation of size nor a direct counterpart to Imperial designs. It is a distinct expression of a different technological and cultural paradigm, one that prioritizes the seamless integration of mind, machine, and spirit. In the context of its development and capabilities, the Phantom is not merely a weapon, it is a culmination of Aeldari engineering, psychic discipline, and ancestral continuity, expressed in a form that is both elegant and devastating. The operation of the Phantom Titan cannot be separated from the nature of its crew. Unlike Imperial engines, where crew roles are compartmentalized into command, moderation, and systems control, the Phantom is directed through a unified psychic interface that requires an unusually intimate relationship between its operators and the machine itself. The number of living pilots varies across recorded sources, but the most consistent accounts describe configurations involving 1 to 3 steersmen. These individuals do not function as separate operators managing discrete subsystems. They form a collective consciousness, merged with the Titan's internal spirit network, which allows the entire construct to be guided as though it were a single body. This method of control is made possible through the integration of spirit stones and psycho-reactive conduits within the Titan's wraithbone core. Each pilot is linked to the machine through a headband or neural interface that contains fragments of the Titan's spirit matrix. When engaged, the pilots do not issue commands in a conventional sense. Instead, they project intent. The Titan responds to that intent immediately, translating thought into motion without the delay imposed by mechanical interpretation. This process eliminates the need for layered command structures and allows the Phantom to act with a degree of coordination that would otherwise require extensive crew communication. The requirement for such synchronization places strict conditions on who can serve as a Phantom's crew. Sources consistently emphasize the importance of familial bonds, particularly among twins or triplets. These relationships provide a natural foundation for the level of mental alignment required to operate the Titan effectively. In many cases, crews are prepared for this role from an early age, undergoing training that conditions them to function as a cohesive unit rather than as individuals. This training is not limited to technical proficiency. It includes psychological conditioning and ritual practices designed to strengthen the connection between the pilots and the Titan's spirit network. The presence of the dead within that network further complicates the role of the crew. The spirit stones embedded throughout the Titan house the souls of deceased Aeldari, many of whom were once pilots or members of the same clan. These spirits are not passive. They contribute to the Titan's consciousness, providing experience, instinct, and continuity. When a crew merges with the Titan, they are not only linking with each other, but also with the accumulated presence of those who came before them. This creates a layered awareness in which multiple generations participate in the operation of a single machine. Such a system offers clear advantages. The inclusion of ancestral knowledge allows the Titan to respond to familiar combat scenarios with refined precision. Patterns of movement, targeting solutions, and battlefield awareness can be informed by experiences that extend beyond the lifespan of any individual pilot. At the same time, this integration introduces psychological risks. The boundary between self and collective can become indistinct, particularly during prolonged engagements. Maintaining individual identity while participating in a shared consciousness requires discipline and resilience. Failure to do so can result in disorientation or loss of control, although such occurrences are rarely documented in surviving sources. The structure of the crew is supported by the existence of Titan clans within the craftworlds. These clans are responsible for the maintenance, operation, and preservation of the Phantom Titan across generations. Membership within such a clan is both an honor and a responsibility, reflecting the rarity and significance of the Titan itself. The clan ensures continuity of knowledge, oversees the training of future pilots, and maintains the rituals necessary to sustain the Titan's spirit network. This institutional framework reinforces the idea that the Phantom is not an isolated asset, but part of a broader cultural and familial system. In terms of use, the Phantom Titan is not deployed as a standard battlefield unit. Its rarity and the complexity of its operation limit its use to situations of considerable strategic importance. Craftworld doctrine favours precision strikes, rapid deployment, and minimal exposure to unnecessary risk. The Phantom is therefore reserved for engagements where such methods are insufficient. These include large-scale conflicts, defensive actions against significant threats, and operations where the destruction of heavily fortified targets is required. When deployed, the Phantom functions as a force multiplier. Its presence can alter the balance of an engagement, providing the Aeldari with a level of firepower and battlefield control that exceeds that of smaller units. Its ability to engage multiple targets, combined with its mobility, allows it to influence a wide area of the battlefield. It can eliminate key enemy assets, disrupt formations, and create opportunities for other Aeldari forces to exploit. Despite its size, it does not operate as a static anchor. Instead, it moves through the battlefield, applying pressure where it is most effective and withdrawing before it can be effectively countered. The Phantom's use is closely tied to the strategic environment of the craftworlds. Aeldari forces rely heavily on the webway for rapid movement and deployment. The size of the Phantom requires that webway portals be expanded to accommodate its passage, a process that is not undertaken lightly. This logistical requirement further restricts the Titan's deployment to situations where its presence is deemed essential. Once on the battlefield, the Phantom operates in coordination with other Aeldari units, integrating its actions with those of aspect warriors, vehicles, and support elements. The Titan's mobility and targeting capabilities allow it to fulfill multiple roles within an engagement. It can act as a long-range fire support platform, engaging enemy assets from a distance while remaining difficult to target. It can also function in a more direct assault role, closing with enemy forces to deliver decisive strikes against critical objectives. The choice of role depends on the tactical situation and the objectives of the engagement. In either case, the Phantom's effectiveness is enhanced by its ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. The conclusion of the Phantom Titan's operational profile returns to the same principles that define its origin and design. It is a machine that cannot be understood solely through its physical characteristics or its weapon systems. Its true nature lies in the integration of those elements with the psychic and cultural framework of the Aeldari. The pilots are not separate from the machine, and the machine is not separate from the legacy of those who have operated it. This unity allows the Phantom to achieve a level of performance that would be difficult to replicate through purely mechanical means. At the same time, this unity imposes limitations. The reliance on skilled, closely bonded crews, the need for ritual and continuity, and the logistical challenges associated with its deployment all contribute to its rarity. The Phantom is not a tool that can be produced or replaced easily. Each instance represents a significant investment of time, expertise, and cultural significance. Its loss carries consequences that extend beyond the immediate tactical impact. In the broader context of Aeldari warfare, the Phantom Titan stands as a representation of a civilization that has chosen to preserve its identity even in the face of decline. It does not seek to match the Imperium in scale or durability. Instead, it embodies a different approach, one that prioritizes precision, integration, and the preservation of knowledge across generations. The Phantom is both a weapon and a repository, a construct that carries within it the memories and skills of those who have come before. This dual nature defines its role on the battlefield. It is not merely an instrument of destruction, but a continuation of Aeldari existence expressed through war. When a Phantom Titan enters an engagement, it brings with it not only the capabilities of a super-heavy war engine, but also the accumulated experience of its lineage. In this sense, every action it takes is informed by a history that extends beyond the present moment. The result is a machine that operates with a level of coherence and purpose that reflects the enduring principles of its creators. With its origins, capabilities, and operational role established, the Phantom Titan can be understood as one of the most refined expressions of Aeldari engineering and warfare. It is a construct shaped by necessity, guided by tradition, and sustained through the integration of living and ancestral minds. In its design and use, it illustrates the balance that the Aeldari seek to maintain between survival and identity, even as they continue to face the challenges of a hostile and changing galaxy. The earliest Administratum and Mechanicus records concerning the Phantom Titan do not begin with classification, but with correction. Initial battlefield reports frequently misidentified the construct as a variant of known Aeldari engines, often grouping it with the smaller Revenant class due to its speed and visual similarity at distance. It was only after repeated engagements, combined with post-conflict analysis of movement patterns and energy output, that a distinction was formally recognized. Adeptus Mechanicus observers noted that the engine in question exceeded expected parameters for size, output, and control cohesion, leading to its eventual categorization as a separate and higher-order Titan class within Aeldari war constructs. Administratum summaries describe the first confirmed sightings as disorienting in nature, not due to unfamiliarity alone, but due to the inconsistency between expected and observed behavior. Imperial doctrine conditions its observers to interpret large war engines through the lens of mass, inertia, and predictable response delay. The Phantom Titan disrupts these expectations. Reports consistently emphasize that it does not adhere to the anticipated limitations of scale. Movement is described as continuous rather than segmented, with no visible lag between directional change and execution. This has led to repeated miscalculations in early engagements, where Imperial forces attempted to anticipate the Titan's path based on conventional models, only to find those projections invalid within moments. Mechanicus observational logs provide more structured analysis. One recurring point of interest is the Titan's reaction time under combat conditions. Where Imperial engines require measurable intervals to adjust stance, realign weapons, and compensate for recoil or terrain, the Phantom demonstrates near instantaneous adaptation. This has been attributed to the integration of its psychic control system with its structural framework. Mechanicus theorists, operating without full understanding of Aeldari psycho-reactive technology, describe the system as a form of direct intent translation, eliminating intermediate mechanical processes. While this interpretation remains incomplete, it aligns with recorded performance data indicating that the Phantom can alter its orientation and targeting vector faster than Imperial targeting systems can reliably track. The holofield projection system has received particular attention within Mechanicus studies. Administratum battlefield accounts often describe incoming fire appearing to pass through the Titan without effect, only for subsequent analysis to reveal that the target had been misaligned at the moment of impact. Mechanicus observers interpret this as a layered distortion field rather than a conventional energy shield. The field does not absorb incoming attacks in a measurable way. Instead, it interferes with the accuracy of those attacks before they are resolved. This distinction has significant strategic implications. Standard Imperial doctrine emphasizes sustained fire to overwhelm defensive systems, but in the case of the Phantom, volume alone does not guarantee effectiveness if targeting solutions remain compromised. Further analysis suggests that the holofield's effectiveness increases in conjunction with the Titan's movement. Static observation yields less distortion than active maneuvering, indicating that the system may be designed to exploit motion as a variable in its projection. This creates a compounded defensive effect, where the Titan's mobility and its distortion field reinforce each other. Mechanicus recommendations derived from these observations emphasize the need for predictive targeting algorithms and coordinated fire patterns, although even these measures have shown limited success in recorded engagements. Administratum strategic assessments focus heavily on the Phantom's role within Aeldari operational doctrine. Unlike Imperial Titans, which are often deployed as central anchors in large-scale engagements, the Phantom is rarely observed maintaining a fixed position. Instead, it operates as a highly mobile strike asset, engaging targets of opportunity and withdrawing before enemy forces can concentrate sufficient firepower. This pattern aligns with broader Aeldari strategies that prioritize flexibility, speed, and selective engagement over prolonged confrontation. In multiple recorded conflicts, the presence of a Phantom Titan has been associated with rapid shifts in battlefield momentum. Administratum reports note that its ability to eliminate high-value targets, such as command vehicles, heavy artillery, and other Titans, can destabilize enemy formations within a short time frame. This effect is amplified by the psychological impact of its appearance. Imperial forces accustomed to engaging slower, more predictable engines often require time to adjust to the Phantom's behavior, during which their operational effectiveness is reduced. Mechanicus analyses of weapon systems further reinforce this assessment. The pulsar, frequently identified as the Phantom's primary armament, is noted for its combination of rate of fire and destructive output. Observers record instances where multiple high-energy blasts are delivered in rapid succession, allowing the Titan to engage and disable heavily armoured targets before they can respond effectively. Complementary energy weapons, including focused beam systems analogous to laser lances, provide additional precision, enabling the Phantom to target critical structural points with minimal exposure time. The integration of these weapons with the Titan's advanced targeting capabilities results in a form of combat efficiency that Mechanicus analysts find difficult to replicate within Imperial systems. The Phantom does not require extended stabilization to achieve accuracy. It can fire effectively while in motion, maintaining both offensive pressure and defensive mobility. This dual capability complicates standard engagement protocols, which often rely on forcing enemy Titans into positions where they must choose between movement and accuracy. Administratum records also highlight the Phantom's selective deployment as a key factor in its strategic value. Its appearance is typically associated with engagements of significant importance, suggesting that Aeldari forces commit these assets only when necessary. This restraint increases the impact of each deployment, as opposing forces cannot rely on frequent exposure to develop effective countermeasures. The rarity of the Phantom, combined with its performance characteristics, contributes to its reputation as a decisive element in Aeldari warfare. Mechanicus speculation regarding the Titan's internal systems remains limited by a lack of direct access. However, recovered fragments of wraithbone and partial data from battlefield scans have led to several working theories. One such theory proposes that the Titan's internal structure functions as a distributed processing network, with no single point of control equivalent to an Imperial command throne. Instead, control and feedback are spread throughout the wraithbone matrix, allowing for rapid adaptation and redundancy. This would explain the Titan's ability to continue operating effectively despite localized damage, as well as its resistance to disruption through conventional means. Another area of interest is the role of the Spirit Network in combat performance. While Imperial doctrine does not recognize the existence of such systems, Mechanicus observers have noted anomalies in energy readings and response patterns that suggest the presence of non-mechanical inputs. These anomalies are often correlated with moments of heightened performance, such as rapid target acquisition or unexpected maneuvering. Although these observations cannot be fully explained within the current framework of Mechanicus knowledge, they are consistently recorded across multiple engagements, lending credibility to the hypothesis that the Phantom's effectiveness is partially derived from factors beyond conventional engineering. Strategic use findings compiled by the Administratum emphasize the need for adaptation when engaging Phantom Titans. Traditional methods such as static defense lines or reliance on heavy armor are identified as insufficient when used in isolation. Instead, successful engagements are associated with coordinated efforts that combine mobility, predictive targeting, and concentrated firepower. Even then, outcomes remain uncertain, as the Phantom's capabilities allow it to disengage from unfavorable situations with relative ease. Despite these challenges, Administratum reports do not characterize the Phantom as invulnerable. Instances of successful engagement, while rare, indicate that the Titan can be neutralized under specific conditions. These typically involve restricting its movement, overwhelming its defensive systems through sustained and coordinated fire, or exploiting moments where its attention is divided across multiple threats. However, achieving these conditions requires a level of coordination and resource commitment that is not always feasible in active combat scenarios. In summary, the combined observations of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus present the Phantom Titan as a highly specialized and strategically significant asset within Aeldari warfare. Its distinctive traits, including exceptional mobility, advanced distortion defenses, and integrated control systems, challenge conventional approaches to Titan engagement. Its strategic use reflects a doctrine that prioritizes precision and adaptability, deploying overwhelming force only when necessary and withdrawing before sustaining significant losses. These findings underscore a broader conclusion within Imperial analysis. The Phantom Titan is not merely an alternative design within the category of super-heavy war engines. It represents a fundamentally different approach to warfare, one that integrates technology, psychic capability, and strategic restraint into a cohesive whole. Understanding this approach remains a challenge for Imperial forces, as it requires not only technical adaptation, but also a reassessment of the assumptions that underpin their own doctrines. Administratum and Mechanicus records addressing the construction and sustainment of the Phantom Titan are defined less by precise accounting and more by absence. Unlike Imperial engines, whose costs can be traced through forge outputs, tithe allocations, and material requisition logs, the Phantom exists outside any system that produces comparable documentation. As a result, most cost assessments are inferential, derived from battlefield rarity, observed material composition, and the cultural practices of the Aeldari. The consistent conclusion across these records is that the Phantom Titan represents an investment that cannot be meaningfully expressed in standard Imperial metrics of labour hours, raw material tonnage, or forge yield. Mechanicus analysts note that the primary construction material, identified as wraithbone, does not conform to any known industrial production process. It is not mined, refined, or cast in the conventional sense. Instead, it is grown through psycho-reactive manipulation by Aeldari specialists known as Bonesingers. This alone removes the Phantom from the scope of conventional resource calculation. The growth of a wraithbone structure requires not only time, but also the presence of individuals capable of shaping it through sustained psychic effort. These individuals are themselves rare, and their work is limited by both physical endurance and the inherent complexity of the structures they create. Administratum estimates, therefore, treat the construction of a Phantom Titan as a prolonged process, likely extending across significant periods of time relative to Imperial production cycles. The absence of standardized manufacturing lines suggests that each Titan is effectively a unique construct, tailored through iterative growth and refinement rather than replicated through uniform design templates. This has led to the conclusion that the limiting factor in Phantom production is not material scarcity in the conventional sense, but the availability of skilled practitioners and the cultural willingness to commit them to such an undertaking. Further complicating cost analysis is the integration of spirit stones and the Titan's internal psychic architecture. These elements are not interchangeable components that can be sourced or replaced without consequence. Each spirit stone represents an individual Aeldari soul, preserved and integrated into the Titan's network. The accumulation of these stones over time contributes to the Titan's operational capability, but also represents a form of cultural and spiritual investment that cannot be quantified in material terms. Administratum records acknowledge this factor indirectly, noting that the loss of a Phantom Titan carries implications beyond the destruction of a war asset, affecting the continuity of Aeldari lineage and memory. Mechanicus speculation extends this analysis by proposing that the Phantom's construction process includes stages that are not strictly physical. The integration of the spirit network, the calibration of psychic conduits, and the alignment of the Titan's internal consciousness are all considered essential to its function. These processes likely require ritualized practices and extended periods of synchronization between the Titan and its intended crew. From an Imperial perspective, this represents a form of non-productive time, further increasing the effective cost of the construct when compared to purely mechanical systems. Maintenance and supply considerations for the Phantom Titan diverge even further from Imperial norms. Mechanicus observers have found no evidence of standard resupply chains or maintenance depots associated with Aeldari Titan operations. Instead, upkeep appears to be conducted within the craftworld environment, under the supervision of Titan clans and Bonesingers. The wraithbone structure itself exhibits properties that reduce the need for conventional repair. Minor damage can be reshaped or healed through psychic intervention, restoring structural integrity without the need for component replacement. This self-restorative capability significantly alters the logistical profile of the Phantom. Where Imperial Titans require continuous supply of spare parts, fuel and maintenance crews, the Phantom relies on a combination of inherent material properties and specialized personnel. However, this does not imply that maintenance is simple or easily achieved. The requirement for Bonesingers and the need to maintain the integrity of the spirit network introduce dependencies that are both rare and difficult to replace. If the necessary expertise is unavailable, damage to the Titan may persist, reducing its effectiveness over time. Supply considerations during active deployment are similarly minimal in conventional terms. The Phantom does not rely on fuel in the same manner as Imperial engines, and its ammunition requirements are limited by the nature of its primary weapons, which are energy-based. This allows it to operate with a degree of independence that reduces its logistical footprint on the battlefield. Administratum reports note that this independence contributes to its effectiveness, as it is not constrained by the need to protect supply lines or maintain proximity to support units. Despite these advantages, Mechanicus analysis identifies several areas of vulnerability within the Phantom sustainment model. The reliance on psychic systems introduces potential points of failure that are not present in purely mechanical constructs. Disruption of the Titan's spirit network, whether through damage to embedded stones or interference with its psychic conduits, could degrade its performance or compromise its control systems. While direct evidence of such occurrences is limited, the theoretical risk is acknowledged in multiple reports. Strength and weakness analysis conducted by the Administratum emphasizes the Phantom's role as a highly specialized asset rather than a general-purpose war engine. Its primary strengths are consistently identified as mobility, precision, and integrated control. The Titan's ability to move rapidly across the battlefield, combined with its advanced targeting capabilities, allows it to engage and disengage on its own terms. This flexibility enables it to exploit weaknesses in enemy formations and avoid prolonged exposure to concentrated fire. The holofield system is also cited as a major strength, particularly in its ability to degrade enemy targeting effectiveness. By reducing the accuracy of incoming fire, the Phantom increases its survivability without relying on heavy armor. This aligns with its overall design philosophy, which prioritizes avoidance over endurance. When combined with its mobility, the holofield creates a defensive profile that is difficult to counter using standard engagement tactics. Offensively, the Phantom's strength lies in its capacity to deliver high-energy attacks with both speed and accuracy. Its weapons are capable of engaging heavily armored targets, including other Titans, while its targeting systems allow it to maintain effectiveness even while maneuvering. This combination enables it to apply sustained pressure without sacrificing its defensive advantages. However, these strengths are balanced by identifiable weaknesses. The most significant of these is its relative vulnerability to sustained, concentrated fire. While the holofield and mobility reduce the likelihood of being hit, they do not eliminate it entirely. In situations where the Phantom is forced into constrained environments, or where enemy forces can coordinate attacks effectively, its lighter armor becomes a limiting factor. Prolonged exposure under such conditions increases the risk of critical damage. Another weakness identified in Mechanicus reports is the complexity of its control system. The reliance on a unified psychic interface, while providing exceptional responsiveness, also introduces potential instability. The need for precise synchronization between pilots and the Titan spirit network means that any disruption to this balance could impact performance. This includes not only physical damage to control interfaces, but also psychological or psychic strain on the crew. Administratum analyses also note the strategic limitation imposed by the Phantom's rarity. Its deployment is necessarily selective, which means that it cannot be relied upon as a consistent element of Aeldari military operations. This contrasts with Imperial doctrine, which often emphasizes the deployment of multiple Titans to achieve redundancy and sustained presence on the battlefield. The Phantom's impact is therefore concentrated but not continuous, requiring careful consideration of when and where it is committed. In summary, the construction, maintenance, and operational profile of the Phantom Titan reflect a system that prioritizes quality, integration, and specialization over scalability and standardization. Its cost, while difficult to quantify, is understood to be exceptionally high in terms of time, expertise, and cultural investment. Its maintenance relies on unique capabilities that are not easily replicated, and its supply requirements are minimal but highly specialized. The strength of the Phantom lies in its ability to operate with a degree of efficiency and adaptability that exceeds that of most conventional war engines. Its weaknesses arise from the same factors that define it, including its reliance on psychic systems, its relative lack of heavy armor, and its limited availability. From the perspective of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus, the Phantom Titan represents a form of warfare that is both highly effective and fundamentally incompatible with Imperial methods, requiring not only technical countermeasures, but also a reconsideration of the assumptions that underpin Imperial military doctrine. Administratum war archives referencing the Phantom Titan are fragmented, often reconstructed from overlapping field reports, damaged data slates, and secondary testimony from surviving units. Direct confirmation is rare, as engagements involving Aeldari forces frequently occur under conditions that limit sustained observation. However, across multiple sectors and time periods, a consistent pattern emerges in records where an unidentified or partially identified Aeldari Titan class demonstrates characteristics now attributed to the Phantom. These records provide the foundation for understanding its battlefield role through accumulated observation rather than isolated confirmation. Early engagements recorded along contested maiden worlds and frontier systems describe encounters with Aeldari war engines that exceeded expected parameters for speed and firepower. Imperial Guard formations reported the sudden loss of armoured spearheads following brief but concentrated energy strikes, with no corresponding opportunity for retaliation. In several such cases, accompanying reports describe visual distortion around the attacking engine, preventing accurate range finding and contributing to initial misidentification. Only after repeated sightings did Administratum archivists begin to correlate these incidents, identifying a consistent threat profile distinct from smaller Aeldari constructs. Mechanicus battlefield data recovered from these engagements highlights the Phantom's role in neutralizing high-value targets during the early stages of conflict. Observations indicate that the Titan frequently prioritizes command elements, artillery positions, and heavy armor concentrations. By eliminating these assets rapidly, it disrupts the operational cohesion of opposing forces, creating conditions in which Aeldari units can exploit the resulting disarray. This pattern is consistent across multiple recorded conflicts, suggesting a deliberate strategic application rather than opportunistic targeting. In larger-scale engagements, including those involving Imperial Titans, the Phantom's performance has been noted as both effective and difficult to counter. Administratum battle logs describe instances where Imperial engines engaged Aeldari Titans under the assumption of conventional response behavior, only to encounter a level of mobility and targeting precision that invalidated those assumptions. In several recorded cases, Imperial Titans sustained critical damage before achieving effective targeting solutions, with incoming fire either missing or striking distorted projections generated by the Phantom's holofield. Mechanicus analyses of these encounters emphasize the mismatch between Imperial engagement doctrine and the Phantom's operational characteristics. Imperial Titans are designed to dominate through durability and sustained fire, maintaining presence on the battlefield while absorbing and returning damage. The Phantom, by contrast, avoids prolonged exposure, engaging in controlled bursts of activity followed by rapid repositioning. This difference in approach creates a dynamic where Imperial forces must adapt to a moving target that does not conform to expected engagement cycles. One notable pattern in battle records is the Phantom's tendency to engage at the edge of effective range before closing distance selectively. Administratum observers have recorded sequences in which the Titan delivers long-range fire to weaken or disorient enemy formations, then advances to exploit specific vulnerabilities. This phased approach allows the Phantom to maintain control over the engagement tempo, dictating when and where decisive action occurs. Imperial forces attempting to respond often find themselves reacting to a sequence of events that has already progressed beyond their initial calculations. Vehicle effectiveness assessments compiled by the Administratum consistently rate the Phantom Titan as a high-impact asset with disproportionate influence relative to its numbers. Its ability to eliminate critical targets, combined with its survivability under dynamic conditions, results in a level of battlefield control that exceeds that of many larger or more heavily armoured engines. Reports indicate that even a single Phantom Titan can alter the outcome of localised engagements, particularly when supported by other Aeldari units operating within the same strategic framework. Mechanicus evaluations further refine this assessment by examining performance metrics derived from recorded engagements. These include response time, targeting accuracy, and damage output relative to exposure duration. In each category, the Phantom demonstrates performance characteristics that exceed those of comparable Imperial engines when operating under similar conditions. Its ability to maintain accuracy while in motion, in particular, is identified as a key factor in its effectiveness. This allows it to apply continuous pressure without sacrificing its defensive mobility, a capability that is not easily replicated within Imperial designs. Despite these strengths, battle records also provide insight into conditions under which the Phantom's effectiveness is reduced. Administratum reports note that environments restricting movement, such as dense urban terrain or heavily fortified positions, can limit the Titan's ability to exploit its mobility. In such scenarios, the Phantom may be forced into engagements where its reliance on evasion is less effective, increasing its exposure to concentrated fire. Instances of successful Imperial counteraction often involve coordinated efforts to constrain the Titan's movement and focus sustained firepower on its position. Mechanicus analyses of these engagements suggest that while the Phantom is highly adaptable, it is not immune to the fundamental limitations imposed by its design philosophy. Its defensive systems, while effective against dispersed or poorly coordinated attacks, can be overwhelmed under conditions of sustained and accurately targeted fire. Additionally, the complexity of its control system introduces potential vulnerabilities, particularly if the synchronization between pilots and the Titan's internal network is disrupted. Although direct evidence of such disruptions is limited, theoretical models indicate that they could impact performance significantly. Another recurring observation in battle records is the Phantom's tendency to disengage once its objectives have been achieved. Unlike Imperial Titans, which may remain on the battlefield to consolidate gains or provide ongoing support, the Phantom often withdraws following the successful completion of its assigned role. This behaviour aligns with Aeldari strategic doctrine, which prioritises the preservation of assets and the avoidance of unnecessary risk. From an administratum perspective, this makes it difficult to achieve decisive engagements against the Phantom, as it does not remain in conditions where it can be systematically targeted and destroyed. The psychological impact of the Phantom's presence is also noted in several reports. Imperial forces encountering the Titan for the first time often experience a period of uncertainty as they attempt to interpret its behaviour. The combination of its speed, distortion fields, and precision strikes creates a perception of unpredictability, which can affect unit cohesion and response time. Administratum analysts emphasise that this effect, while secondary to its physical capabilities, contributes to its overall effectiveness by reducing the efficiency of opposing forces. Mechanicus' conclusions regarding the Phantom Titan emphasise its role as a product of a fundamentally different technological paradigm. Its performance in battle is not solely the result of advanced materials or weapon systems, but of the integration of these elements with a control architecture that prioritizes immediacy and cohesion. This integration allows the Phantom to operate with a level of efficiency that challenges conventional models of mechanized warfare. From a strategic perspective, the Phantom is assessed as a force multiplier that amplifies the effectiveness of Aeldari operations without requiring large-scale deployment. Its selective use ensures that it is committed only when its impact will be most significant, maximizing the return on the considerable investment represented by each Titan. This approach contrasts with Imperial doctrine, which often relies on the cumulative effect of multiple assets to achieve similar outcomes. In conclusion, the combined war records and analytical assessments of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus present the Phantom Titan as a highly effective and strategically disruptive war engine. Its ability to dictate engagement conditions, eliminate critical targets, and withdraw before sustaining significant losses positions it as a formidable opponent within any theatre of war. While not invulnerable, its strengths are such that conventional engagement strategies are often insufficient to counter it effectively. The Phantom Titan exemplifies a mode of warfare that prioritizes precision, adaptability, and integration over endurance and mass. For Imperial forces, this represents both a challenge and a point of study, highlighting the limitations of existing doctrines when confronted with fundamentally different approaches to combat. As long as such engines remain in Aeldari service, their presence will continue to influence the strategic considerations of those who encounter them, requiring constant adaptation and vigilance in the face of an adversary that does not conform to established expectations. Inquisition records concerning the Phantom Titan are not organized in the same manner as Administratum or Mechanicus reports. Where those bodies attempt classification and systematization, the Inquisition approaches the subject through anomaly tracking, threat correlation, and pattern disruption analysis. The Phantom Titan appears within these archives not as a single defined entry, but as a recurring disturbance across otherwise unrelated investigations. It is frequently identified only after the fact, when fragmented accounts, distorted pick captures, and inconsistent sensor logs are cross-examined and aligned under a common behavioral profile. The first consistent impression recorded within Ordo Xenos files is not its scale or armament, but its absence from expected timelines. In multiple engagements, the presence of a large Aeldari war engine is only confirmed after its withdrawal. Witnesses describe a towering construct moving with unnatural precision, yet sensor logs either fail to capture it clearly or record conflicting positional data. In several cases, the Titan appears to occupy multiple coordinates within the same engagement window, a phenomenon initially attributed to data corruption or equipment failure. Subsequent analysis suggests that this effect is linked to its holofield systems interacting with both visual and/or specs-based detection methods. Inquisitorial observers note that this distortion extends beyond battlefield targeting. It interferes with post-engagement reconstruction, making it difficult to establish a definitive sequence of events. Reports that would normally align within acceptable variants instead diverge significantly, with discrepancies in timing, positioning, and even the number of observed targets. This has led to the classification of Phantom Titan encounters as unstable data events, requiring specialized review protocols. In practical terms, the Titan does not merely evade detection during combat, it complicates the ability to understand what occurred afterward. A second area of concern within Inquisition records is the Titan's apparent awareness of observation. Several investigations include accounts in which the Phantom alters its behavior in response to concealed or long-range surveillance. In one instance, a reconnaissance unit positioned beyond standard engagement distance reported that the Titan adjusted its movement pattern to obscure line of sight, despite no direct threat being present. In another, long-range auger arrays experienced localized interference coinciding with the Titan's repositioning, as if the machine had identified and responded to the act of observation itself. While such accounts cannot be verified conclusively, their recurrence has led to speculation that the Phantom's sensory capabilities extend beyond conventional detection methods. This raises a broader question addressed within Ordo Xenos analysis. the extent to which the Phantom Titan operates as an independent intelligence rather than a purely directed construct. While Mechanicus interpretations acknowledge the presence of a composite consciousness, inquisitorial records approach this from a different angle. If the Titan's internal spirit network contributes to its decision-making, then it may possess a form of situational awareness that is not limited to the perception of its current pilots. This could include pattern recognition based on accumulated experience across multiple engagements, or even the ability to anticipate threats based on subtle environmental cues. Some inquisitors extend this line of reasoning further, proposing that the Phantom's consciousness may not be entirely confined to its physical structure. This remains unconfirmed, but is supported by isolated reports in which Aeldari forces appear to coordinate with the Titan in a manner that exceeds standard communication methods. Movements are synchronized with minimal observable signaling, and responses to changing battlefield conditions occur with a speed that suggests preemptive alignment rather than reactive coordination. While such behavior could be explained through advanced psychic communication, the possibility of a more integrated network remains under consideration. Conspiracy findings within the Inquisition often emerge from the intersection of incomplete data and repeated anomaly. In the case of the Phantom Titan, one such theory concerns the origin of its internal spirit network. While it is established that Aeldari spirit stones house the souls of the deceased, some inquisitorial analysts question whether all such souls are voluntary participants. This theory suggests that, in times of desperation, the Aeldari may bind unwilling or fragmented consciousnesses into their war constructs to enhance performance. There is no direct evidence to support this claim, and it is contested by other Ordo Xenos authorities, but it persists due to the difficulty of verifying the conditions under which spirit stones are integrated. Another area of speculation involves the potential for the Phantom Titan to act as a mobile extension of the craftworld infinity circuit. If the Titan's internal network is sufficiently advanced, it may function as a localized node of a larger psychic system, allowing it to access or share information beyond its immediate structure. This would provide a possible explanation for its rapid adaptation and coordinated behavior, as well as its apparent sensitivity to observation. However, this theory remains unconfirmed and is treated with caution within official records. Inquisitorial observations also highlight the psychological impact of encountering a Phantom Titan. Unlike Imperial engines, which present a clear and consistent threat profile, the Phantom's behavior introduces elements of uncertainty that can affect perception and decision-making. Units exposed to its presence report difficulty maintaining accurate situational awareness, with some individuals describing a sense of dislocation or delayed comprehension of events. While these effects are often attributed to the stress of combat, their consistency across multiple reports has led to further scrutiny. One hypothesis suggests that the Titan's holofield may have secondary effects on human perception beyond its primary function of visual distortion. If the field interacts with cognitive processing in addition to sensory input, it could contribute to the observed discrepancies in witness accounts. This remains speculative, as no controlled studies have been conducted, but it aligns with the broader pattern of the Phantom disrupting both observation and interpretation. The Inquisition also notes the absence of certain expected indicators in Phantom Titan engagements. There are few reports of sustained damage accumulation, mechanical degradation, or logistical strain. This absence is not interpreted as evidence of invulnerability, but rather as an indication that such factors are either minimized or effectively concealed. The lack of observable maintenance activity in particular raises questions about how the Titan sustains prolonged operational readiness. While Mechanicus theories propose self-restorative properties of wraithbone, inquisitorial records remain cautious, emphasizing that the true extent of these capabilities is not fully understood. A recurring theme in these archives is the difficulty of establishing definitive conclusions. Each confirmed observation introduces new variables that complicate the overall picture. The Phantom Titan resists categorization not only because of its capabilities, but because of the manner in which those capabilities interact with perception, data collection and analysis. It is not simply a matter of incomplete information. The information itself is often inconsistent, requiring interpretation that acknowledges both its value and its limitations. From an Inquisition perspective, this uncertainty is itself a significant factor. A threat that cannot be reliably observed or predicted introduces risks that extend beyond its immediate physical impact. It challenges the ability of Imperial forces to plan, respond, and learn from engagement. In this context, the Phantom Titan is not only a war engine, but a source of informational disruption, complicating efforts to build a coherent understanding of Aeldari capabilities. In conclusion, Inquisition impressions of the Phantom Titan emphasize its role as both a physical and informational anomaly. Its presence is marked by distortion, inconsistency, and the erosion of reliable data. Observations suggest capabilities that extend beyond conventional frameworks, including advanced awareness, integrated consciousness, and potential connections to broader psychic systems. Conspiracy findings, while unconfirmed, reflect the difficulty of reconciling these observations with established knowledge. The Phantom Titan occupies a space within Inquisition archives that is defined as much by what cannot be confirmed as by what can. It represents a convergence of advanced technology and psychic phenomena that resists straightforward analysis. As such, it remains a subject of ongoing investigation, with each new encounter contributing to a body of knowledge that is inherently incomplete, yet increasingly significant in understanding the nature of Aeldari warfare and the challenges it presents. Inquisitorial interrogative findings concerning the Phantom Titan are derived from fragmented testimonies, recovered data cores, and the controlled questioning of individuals exposed to Aeldari engagements. Direct capture of relevant Aeldari personnel remains exceptionally rare, and when such opportunities arise, the reliability of extracted information is inconsistent. As a result, Ordo Xenos methodologies emphasize cross-comparison of multiple sources, treating each account as a partial data point rather than a complete narrative. Within this framework, the Phantom Titan is not approached as a single subject of inquiry, but as a recurring anomaly whose characteristics must be reconstructed through overlapping evidence. Interrogations of Imperial survivors who have witnessed Phantom Titan deployments reveal a pattern of sensory disruption that extends beyond visual distortion. Subjects frequently describe difficulty recalling the sequence of events, even when exposure was brief. In several cases, individuals provided mutually incompatible accounts of the same engagement, with discrepancies in timing, positioning, and the number of hostile assets involved. These inconsistencies are not attributed solely to battlefield stress. Inquisitorial analysts note that the degree of divergence exceeds what is typically observed in high-intensity combat scenarios, suggesting the presence of an external factor influencing perception or memory formation. Further questioning has identified recurring descriptions of what subjects interpret as anticipation on the part of the Titan. Witnesses report that the Phantom appears to react to threats before they are fully realized, adjusting position or targeting in a manner that seems predictive rather than reactive. When pressed for clarification, subjects often struggle to articulate the basis for this perception, instead describing it as an impression formed during observation. Inquisitorial records treat these statements with caution, but their consistency across unrelated engagements has led to the classification of anticipatory response as a potential operational characteristic. Anomaly reports compiled from battlefield data support aspects of these testimonies. Auspex logs associated with Phantom Titan encounters frequently contain irregularities that cannot be reconciled with known interference patterns. These include transient signal duplication, where a single target appears at multiple coordinates within a narrow time window, and phase inconsistencies, where recorded positions do not align with subsequent visual confirmation. Mechanicus consultation suggests that such effects could result from advanced hollow field projection, but the persistence and complexity of these anomalies have led inquisitorial analysts to consider additional factors. One such factor is the interaction between the Titan's psychic systems and Imperial detection equipment. It is theorized that the Phantom's internal spirit network, in conjunction with its control interface, may generate localized disturbances within the electromagnetic and psychic spectrum. These disturbances could interfere with both machine-based sensors and human cognitive processing, producing the observed discrepancies in data and perception. While this theory remains unverified, it provides a framework for understanding the consistent failure of standard detection methods to produce reliable results during Phantom Titan engagements. Interrogative findings also address the internal structure of the Titan's control system. Limited information obtained from Aeldari sources, combined with analysis of battlefield behavior, supports the conclusion that the Phantom operates through a unified consciousness formed by its pilots and embedded spirits. Inquisitorial questioning has sought to determine the degree of autonomy possessed by this composite entity. Responses vary, but a common theme is the absence of clear separation between operator and machine. This has led to the working hypothesis that the Phantom does not simply execute commands, but participates in decision-making as an integrated intelligence. This hypothesis introduces several implications. If the Titan's consciousness is distributed across both living and deceased components, then its operational capacity may not be limited by the cognitive constraints of individual pilots. It may retain knowledge and experience across deployments, refining its responses over time. This could account for the observed consistency in its behavior, as well as its apparent ability to adapt to unfamiliar conditions with minimal delay. However, the extent to which this constitutes true learning, as opposed to the application of pre-existing patterns, remains uncertain. Conspiracy-oriented findings within the Inquisition expand on these implications, exploring scenarios that cannot be confirmed through available evidence. One such theory proposes that the Phantom Titan's spirit network may include elements that are not fully integrated or controlled. According to this view, the presence of multiple consciousnesses within a single system could create internal tensions or emergent behaviors that are not entirely predictable. While no direct evidence supports this claim, it is cited in discussions of anomalous battlefield behavior where the Titan's actions deviate from established patterns. Another area of speculation concerns the potential for external influence on the Titan's operation. Given the known capabilities of Aeldari psychic communication, it is conceivable that the Phantom could receive input from sources beyond its immediate crew. This could include coordination with other Aeldari units, or even interaction with larger psychic constructs such as craftworld infinity circuits. If such connections exist, they would further complicate attempts to isolate the Titan's decision-making processes, as its actions might reflect inputs from a broader network rather than local conditions alone. Beneficial findings identified by the Inquisition focus primarily on the implications of these systems for understanding Aeldari technology. The Phantom Titan represents a convergence of psychic integration, material engineering, and operational efficiency that exceeds current Imperial capabilities. Study of its behavior has provided indirect insights into the potential applications of psycho-reactive materials and distributed control architectures. While direct replication remains beyond reach, these observations contribute to ongoing research within restricted Mechanicus and inquisitorial programs. From a strategic perspective, the Phantom's reliance on integrated consciousness and mobility offers a model of warfare that emphasizes adaptability and precision. Inquisitorial analysts note that these principles, while difficult to implement within Imperial doctrine, highlight areas where current approaches may be vulnerable. Understanding how the Phantom achieves its effectiveness allows for the development of countermeasures, even if those measures cannot fully replicate its capabilities. Detrimental findings, however, are more immediate and pronounced. The Phantom Titan's ability to disrupt both physical engagement and informational clarity poses a significant challenge to Imperial operations. Its interference with detection systems and cognitive processes reduces the reliability of intelligence gathered during and after engagements. This, in turn, hampers the ability to develop accurate threat assessments and refine tactical responses. The psychological impact on personnel exposed to Phantom Titan encounters is also considered detriment. Repeated exposure to inconsistent sensory input and unpredictable behaviour can degrade confidence in both equipment and command structures. Inquisitorial records include instances where units delayed response actions due to uncertainty regarding target location or identity, resulting in increased vulnerability. While such effects are situational, their potential to influence battlefield outcomes is acknowledged. Another detrimental aspect is the difficulty of containment or neutralization. The Phantom's mobility and tendency to disengage limit opportunities for decisive engagement. Even when its presence is confirmed, coordinating a response that accounts for its capabilities requires significant resources and precise execution. Failures in coordination or timing can result in the Titan achieving its objectives and withdrawing with minimal damage. Anomaly reports also highlight the challenge of distinguishing between genuine sightings and false positives. The distortive effects associated with the Phantom can produce data patterns that resemble its presence even in its absence. This has led to instances where resources were allocated in response to perceived threats that did not materialize, creating inefficiencies within operational planning. The need to verify Phantom Titan activity through multiple independent sources further complicates rapid response efforts. In conclusion, inquisitorial interrogative findings and anomaly reports present the Phantom Titan as a complex and multifaceted threat. Its integration of psychic systems, advanced materials, and coordinated control creates capabilities that extend beyond conventional models of mechanized warfare. While these characteristics offer valuable insights into Aeldari technology, they also introduce significant challenges for Imperial forces. The beneficial aspects of these findings lie primarily in the knowledge gained through observation, informing both theoretical research and the development of counter-strategies. The detrimental aspects are rooted in the Titan's ability to disrupt perception, complicate analysis, and evade decisive engagement. Together, these factors reinforce the classification of the Phantom Titan as not only a formidable war engine, but also a persistent anomaly within the scope of inquisitorial investigation, requiring ongoing study and adaptive response. Urgent inquisitorial findings concerning the Phantom Titan are issued not as static doctrine, but as evolving directives intended to address a threat that resists conventional categorization. Across multiple Ordo Xenos briefings, the Phantom is not treated merely as a battlefield asset of the Aeldari, but as a convergence point of technological and psychic variables that require immediate recognition and controlled response. The primary concern is not its destructive capability alone, but the compound effect of its presence on perception, coordination, and decision-making within Imperial forces. The first urgent directive repeated across inquisitorial records is the necessity of early identification. Phantom Titan engagements are consistently characterized by a narrow window between initial detection and decisive action. Once the Titan has engaged and repositioned, the opportunity to establish a reliable targeting solution diminishes rapidly. As a result, any indication of its presence, including anomalous sensor readings, inconsistent visual data, or unexplained losses among high-value assets, is to be treated as a potential confirmation rather than a tentative observation. Delayed recognition has been identified as a primary factor in unsuccessful engagements. Closely associated with this directive is the warning against reliance on singular data streams. Inquisitorial analysis emphasizes that no single source of information, whether visual, or specs, or command-level reporting, can be considered sufficient when assessing Phantom Titan activity. The distortive effects associated with its holofield and potential psychic interference create conditions in which isolated data is inherently unreliable. Instead, confirmation must be derived from the convergence of multiple independent inputs. Units are instructed to cross-reference observations continuously, prioritizing patterns over individual readings. Another critical warning concerns the interpretation of absence. The Phantom Titan frequently disengages following the completion of its objectives, leaving behind minimal evidence of its presence. In several recorded instances, Imperial forces have assumed the destruction or withdrawal of the Titan based on the cessation of observable activity, only to be subjected to renewed engagement from a different vector. Inquisitorial directives therefore caution against equating silence with safety. The absence of contact is not to be interpreted as the absence of threat. Urgent findings also address the psychological dimension of Phantom Titan encounters. Inquisitorial reports indicate that exposure to its distortive effects can lead to hesitation, misidentification of targets, and degradation of command cohesion. These effects are not uniformly distributed, but their occurrence is frequent enough to warrant specific countermeasures. Units are advised to rely on pre-established engagement protocols rather than real-time interpretation when operating under suspected phantom influence. This approach is intended to reduce the impact of compromised perception by anchoring response actions in predefined structures. From a technical perspective, inquisitorial warnings highlight the limitations of standard engagement strategies. The Phantom's mobility and defensive systems render static defense and uncoordinated fire largely ineffective. Instead, successful countermeasures require synchronized action across multiple units, combining predictive targeting with sustained pressure. Even under optimal conditions, the probability of neutralization remains uncertain. As such, the objective of engagement is often redefined from destruction to disruption, aiming to limit the Titan's ability to achieve its operational goals. An additional area of concern is the potential for misclassification. The Phantom Titan shares certain visual and operational characteristics with other Aeldari constructs, leading to instances where its presence is either underestimated or incorrectly categorized. Inquisitorial records stress the importance of distinguishing between these classes, as the response required for a Phantom differs significantly from that appropriate for smaller or less capable engines. Failure to make this distinction can result in the allocation of insufficient resources and the subsequent escalation of losses. Conspiracy-oriented findings, while not confirmed, introduce further warnings regarding the Phantom's broader implications. Some Inquisitors propose that the Titan may function as a node within a larger Aeldari psychic network, extending its awareness and coordination beyond the immediate battlefield. If accurate, this would suggest that engagements with a Phantom Titan are not isolated events, but part of a wider operational framework. This possibility reinforces the need for caution in assuming that the destruction or withdrawal of a single Titan equates to the resolution of a threat. Another speculative warning concerns the long-term impact of repeated exposure to Phantom Titan engagements. Inquisitorial analysts have identified patterns in which units operating in regions with frequent Aeldari activity exhibit increased rates of data inconsistency and reporting errors. While this may be attributed to cumulative stress or equipment degradation, some theorize that prolonged interaction with the Titan's distortive effects could have lingering consequences on both human perception and machine calibration. This remains unverified, but is considered sufficient grounds for ongoing monitoring. Urgent findings also emphasize the importance of containment at the informational level. The Phantom Titan's ability to disrupt data integrity poses a risk not only during engagement, but also in the analysis that follows. Inquisitorial protocols require that all reports involving suspected Phantom activity be subjected to enhanced verification procedures, including cross-sector comparison and independent review. This is intended to prevent the propagation of inaccurate data within Imperial command structures, which could compromise future operations. From an operational standpoint, the Inquisition advises that engagement with a Phantom Titan should be approached with clearly defined objectives and strict limitations. Attempts to pursue or corner the Titan beyond the scope of initial engagement parameters are discouraged, as they increase the likelihood of entering conditions favorable to the Titan's strengths. Instead, forces are instructed to maintain controlled positioning, applying pressure only within the bounds of coordinated action. This reflects a broader recognition that the Phantom cannot be reliably forced into disadvantageous conditions without significant preparation. In conclusion, the Inquisition's assessment of the Phantom Titan is shaped by a combination of observed capability and persistent uncertainty. Its strengths are not limited to its physical attributes, but extend into its ability to disrupt perception, complicate analysis, and evade decisive engagement. These factors combine to create a threat that operates on both material and informational levels, challenging the effectiveness of conventional responses. The warning signs associated with its presence, including anomalous data, inconsistent reporting, and rapid loss of key assets, must be recognized and acted upon without delay. Failure to do so allows the Phantom to dictate the terms of engagement, leveraging its advantages to achieve its objectives with minimal risk. Even when these signs are identified, the outcome of engagement remains uncertain, requiring a disciplined and adaptive approach. Ultimately, the Phantom Titan represents a form of warfare that cannot be fully understood through existing Imperial frameworks. It embodies a convergence of technology and psychic integration that defies straightforward classification, necessitating continuous study and cautious engagement. Within Inquisitorial archives, it is recorded not only as a weapon of the Aeldari, but as a persistent anomaly, one that demands vigilance, restraint, and the acknowledgement that not all variables can be controlled or predicted.